she had cut this. Sorry, Sam.
You're good.
I've been holding that for 2 minutes. Okay.
You're listening to Enhance, the podcast dedicated to highlighting real stories told by real people.
Hello, Enhance listeners. This is Sam. I'm your host as usual, and today I am joined by one of my very, 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 very best friends and one of my longest friendships. Her name is Olivia Mixon, used to be Olivia Ellis, and we met back in high school. We have known each other since we were like kids, but we started hanging out. What was it? My sophomore year, Olivia?
Right. I believe so.
Yeah. And she was a year behind me. So she was a freshman, and she was my prom date. Was it junior year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've went way back. Olivia, is there anything that you want the people to know about you?
Well, I'm a newlywed.
Yeah.
I graduated my bachelor's in science and communication disorders, and I'm now a speech therapist. And that is my life. That's my complete life. Such
an awesome job. Such a you job too. You're just such a kind and helpful person, and I know that this is a very special place for you. So I'm very happy that you have finally gotten to this place in life.
And so I'm very thankful, because I know growing up, I felt like I never had something that was mine, or that I necessarily excelled in, or, that I had a niche, you would say, and I finally found something. So I do feel very blessed.
Awesome. Well, Olivia, to get us started, I do have an icebreaker for us, like I told you. And so basically, I'll just ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions with it and everything. And then I'll tell you what it says about you and what it means.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Imagine yourself in an enormous white room. Okay. Nothing's in there, just a white room. And in this room, there is a cube. First thing, what color is the cube?
Purple.
Okay. Why is it purple? What makes you, how do you feel about that, about the cube being purple?
Honestly, I'm not to be kind of deep, but I feel very disconnected to it. I first thought multicolor, but then in the back before that was, purple. So I feel a little disconnected to it, but that's what came.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what size is the cube?
Small.
It's small.
Okay, I lied. The size of my head.
The size of your, okay, that's not too bad. That's still say that's smaller. I feel like it could be huge, so I don't think you lied.
It's definitely the size.
Cool. And then where in the room is it located?
In the center.
Okay. And is it on the ground, or is it floating in the air?
It's on the ground.
Awesome sauce. The white room that you imagined yourself in it represents our lives. And inside the white room, there's a cube. So this cube represents the ego and how we see ourselves. The first thing that you said was that it was purple, and that you felt kind of disconnected from it. You wanted to say there were multiple colors, but purple is the one that you really stuck with. And so basically, going off of that, what this website that I'm pulling this from, what it says about is if it's colored, then it means that you hide who you really are from people. But then when you said also the color purple, and that you felt disconnected, and that you felt like there were more colors that were there, that would also say that you may feel kind of disconnected from your ego sometimes, and that you failed to see all of the qualities that you would bring to the table at points. So that's the first part. How do you feel about that?
I feel very connected to that.
You do not feel disconnected from it.
No, I'm wrong connected with that.
Now, the size of the cube is how big or small your ego is. So if the cube is small, it means that you have a small ego and that you're humble. And if the cube is large, then it may mean that you're kind of full of yourself. And for you, I definitely don't think yours was considered large. And I feel like the size of your head, to me, that's not too small of an ego to be a pushover, but also not a giant ego. So to me, it seems like you're humble, but you still have some pride in yourself. So, or maybe that's just me speaking because I know you, but still. How do you feel?
I feel that.
You feel that? Okay. And If the cube is on the ground or fixed, it means that you are well grounded in your views.
Because when I saw the cube, it couldn't be any more on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, it was stapled to the ground.
Well, you know, I mean, I definitely feel like that's true for you, at least like from an outside standpoint, from being friends for so long. You have always been very, very strong in your views. And that's something that I've never really see your views change. I've seen maybe them like evolve some, or like you get more knowledge about something and it may kind of like shift how you think about something. But you've pretty much been like the same, like well-educated, accepting like you since we were young.
Well, thank you. It's like a moral compass. It's like I can't get away from it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've told you, like, you've always been such a, like, because, you know, in high school, I was a little crazy. I was a little.
You were just growing, evolving, developing, all the things.
Yeah, I was trying. I was really trying. But, you know, now I'm very happy with, like, where I've ended up and the person I am and everything. So you were definitely a big part of me developing my own moral compass and, like, you know, being such a chill and open-minded and, like, person, just learning that, like, I did not have to be the results of growing up in a small, straight, white, conservative town.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad. You have no idea. You really don't.
Well, today, guys, to introduce our topic, and it's kind of a heavy topic, but we are actually going to be talking about grief. And that's something that throughout mine and Olivia's friendships, we have seen each other go through. And I actually, as I've talked about on a previous episode, I just lost someone that was very special to me earlier this year. I also lost my father my freshman year in college, but Olivia has also experienced a lot of grief. And so today we're just going to kind of dive into how we've grieved, what that process looked like, the hard parts of it, the parts that may have been a little easier, and just all around what we did. Just know going forward, this may be a heavier topic. And if at any point that you do not feel comfortable listening to the rest of the episode, I'm not going to get mad. I probably won't know, but I won't get mad either. So, Olivia, would you like to start us off?
Well, I guess I will start in 2016. I just graduated high school. I was about to start my first year of college. And towards the end of the semester, my grandmother passed away, my meemaw. That was gut-wrenching, to say the least. Before I could even come to grips with that, not even a month later, really, my big sister passed away on my brother's birthday. And that was my first year in college, and me and my sister lived together. And then last year, my last semester of college, senior year, my cousin passed away. That was a woman that I was close to, that tried everything she could to, fill my big sister's shoes, in a respectable way, of course. So I feel as if I'm no stranger to grief, but that doesn't mean, the next time is any easier than the last, of course.
Absolutely.
And so it's one of those things that grief is it feels so big sometimes, and it can feel so small and internalized that as if no one could ever relate to it, as if you're the only one that's ever experienced it. But it's so personal and different for everyone.
Yeah. And that's something too that we've talked about this a lot, that one of the main things that I admire about your family is how close they are. And how you guys are just so close knit. And whenever Heather passed, just in case we didn't say, Heather was her sister. And whenever Heather passed, we one of the things that I saw was how closely your family came together and grieved together. And that was something I had never really experienced before, because I don't come from a close family that's very tight-knit like that. And so grieving is very much a singular on your own process, which I'm sure, like you said, that there is a lot of that you dealt with too. So of course, everyone is going to deal with moments of feeling alone and feeling like no one really understands what they're going through. But that was something that I did see, that you guys just, for lack of a better word, you grieved so beautifully. And it was so strange, but also it was beautiful to see from the outside, but it was also bittersweet. It was, look at them sticking together, but also imagine how hard that must be to stick together during something like this. So do you mind kind of touching on that and talking about your experience with since all of your like major losses have been in your family, what has that been like with the rest of your family and dealing with that with all of them?
Oh, well, we grieved as a unit, especially in the beginning when the shock was just indescribable. Then, of course, it came to a point where, we had to start our separate journeys, because I remember that night coming home and all of us in the living room, and we were all just scream sobbing, watching some cheesy, movie that we've watched before, not really watching it, of course. But I remember being, I just turned 18 at that point, or 19, excuse me, and I remember seeing my parents sob uncontrollably, and there's a part of me like, to say this and try to say this in a tasteful way, to where I was like, my parents, you always see them as the strong ones, the ones that hold it together no matter what. And I remember even being at that age just thinking, my parents are in shambles right now. They can barely comfort me because they feel no comfort right now. That was really a turning point for me where I really started to see my parents more than ever as human beings before my parents.
Yeah.
As individuals, man, woman, but like before even seeing them as my parents, it was a turning point in a way in regards to my distant family that were still close to her but weren't my immediate family. It really had us close in the beginning when it was really fresh, through the holidays and such, and when time passed on. It did create a little distance between the immediate family, her siblings and parents, to cousins and aunts and everything, because everybody's experiencing their own grief, and sometimes being super close isn't always the most comforting thing, as in, you get to a point, like I said, where you have to start walking your own path.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a healthy path, you're, walking your own path.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you say that, because I never thought about the fact of how it could put distance between, your closer family, which, like I said, I come from a not very close family anyway. So I guess that's why I never really thought about the fact of someone passing, pushing that away. But, you hear all the time that whenever parents lose a child, that a lot of parents typically get a divorce and separate after that. And I'm glad your parents didn't, so please don't think that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I've always wondered why, but then hearing you talk about it now, like about how it did put that distance between you and your immediate family, that I kind of get it now, because if you think about it, like being around your immediate family probably just reminds you of that person. Was that your experience?
I can't necessarily speak for my distant family, of course, but it was almost as if that grief in a way was so personal and special to me, to where I wanted to stay home, as did my parents, where she lived with us, and just drown ourselves in the grief, to just feel it to its full depths. It's so difficult to describe. We would obviously still talk to him and see him, but it was like a unspoken distance between, even if we were in the same room, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not that they didn't love her, and of course they weren't so close to her because they were, but that was my big sister, and that was, their baby girl.
Yeah. And you and your sister were also the only two girls out of all of your siblings, yeah?
Yeah, 5 of us, 3 boys and 2 girls, and she was the second oldest, and I was a baby.
Mm. Yeah, I know that she was just a very special person, and that's something that we've talked about a lot, is that she was one of the very first people that ever, being from Clanton, told me that I could go work on movies, that whenever she was like, well, I think it was my senior year and I was getting ready to go to college. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I really want to work on movies, but I want to do something practical. And she was like, She said, that can be practical. She was like, just go do it. She was like, you can, if that's what you want to do, go do it. And I'll never forget that, that she was the first person, growing up in Clanton, I literally one time had someone look at me. He told me, I don't know why you write all the time. It's not like any of your stuff will ever get published. And so, like, that was kind of the attitude from tons of people in Clinton, because so many of them were just like born there, stay there, and never leave, And so that hearing someone that was there, that had been through so much and everything before her passing, and for her to look at me and be like, you can do this. Like, that was a big deal to me. And that was something that, like, I've really carried with me. And I think about that all the time. I know she was just a very, very special person. I know you guys were very, very close. And, thinking about the fact that grief was something that was so special and significant to you because, it was your own. That reminds me of that whenever, she passed, and I hope it's okay for me to bring this up, but I remember that you, like, moved into her room and you started, like, staying in her room and stuff like that, didn't you?
Yes, ever since that night. That's the only room I slept in. I went there to sleep. There was still clothes on the dresser that she folded, hadn't put away yet. I mean, her bed was still unmade from that morning when she left.
Do you think that gave you some closeness to her?
It was like such a painful closeness. Like, it was gut-wrenching, but to smell the pillows and smell her hair and to just feel her in her space that she took very serious, took a lot of care of, and was so special to her. She would do her studying, her schoolwork, watch her movies, listen to her praise and worship, and I would go in there, just to talk throughout the week while I'm still in high school, or she'd come to my room to ask about, what she was hearing, if I liked it, and just your things, and just, it was painful, but it was a feel-good pain for me. It was indescribable, but it gave me comfort. It felt very fresh. It felt as if she was coming back.
Yeah.
Because everything wasn't tucked away. It was lived in, clean but lived in, and it gave me a weird comfort. Like, she was on her way back home from school, or coming back from somewhere.
Yeah. I know that with earlier this year, I've talked to you a little bit about it, but we haven't really spoke too much on it. But I did lose a very dear friend of mine, and it was someone that I worked with in film, and he was just a very, very special person. I mean, like, to know him was to love him. Like, he did not have, like, I'm not, like, shitting on myself whenever I say this, but I was not special for loving him because you loved him to meet him, But he was also one of those people that just made you feel special, And he did that for everybody. It wasn't that, like, I was special. It was that when he knew you, he knew you. And he took the time to know you, and he took and he genuinely just cared for people. And I think that's because he was part of the, so in film, there's like a health and safety department. And since COVID, it's become like really, really like a COVID department, because usually there's set medics. But since COVID has happened, it's really become like the health and safety department is all about COVID. And that's what he did, was he was like a higher up in the COVID department. And on our last movie together before he passed, he was telling me about how stressful it was, and like how much he was thinking about not doing it anymore and all that other stuff. But he was so good at it. And it wasn't because of the fact that it was a job that he just loved and enjoyed, or he was good at the job. He was just really good at caring for people. And that's like one of my friends that she's a publicist that lives up in New York, and we're just very, very, very close friends. And she was also very close to him. And that was one thing she said, is that whenever she would forget to get like tested, or she would forget to go check in and get her bracelet for the day and stuff like that, to show like if she had been tested, or like when the next day she would be tested was, he would always come and find her. And he would just be like, hey, like, I don't think you've gotten tested. Have you gotten tested? And she'd be like, oh no, sorry, I forgot. And he would like always like escort her and walk her over to the table in such a like kind and caring way. And so, to lose someone like that, like, I feel like Heather was a very similar person, and she was just so kind and loving and really got to know people.
She was definitely always fought for the underdog.
Yeah.
Heather was very kind, had a loving heart, but she also had a very fiery side that she didn't take nothing from nobody ever. And sometimes that burned her. Because, sometimes you do need to take things. Mm-hmm. Even respectfully, don't be a pushover, but I do hear those similarities, that person that sees you
and actually cares about you and the things that you say in your future and cares about your well-being, because a lot of people can talk it, but it's another thing when you show it.
Yeah. And he really was one of those people. And I think that was something too, that whenever you were talking about that closeness, that you felt like that painful closeness. When he passed, we were still, like, the movie was still going on. And I was one of the last people in the office. And I would find myself, like, especially in those last days, like, of being there, I would find myself going up to the section of the office that he worked in just to sit up there for a minute.
Yeah.
Because he lived in Oklahoma and I was in Alabama. I didn't have anything, like, I had nothing to feel close to him and to, like, be back around him, just like none of his friends down there did, And there was just, it was very difficult because there was like a type of closeness I was trying to achieve, but I was also, to be honest with you, handling it very unhealthily. And it wasn't that, in reality, I knew, so I was still grounded in reality, but there was still this, like, really big part of me that believed that he wasn't really dead. That believed that, no, there's a mistake. Something has happened, and there's a mistake. Someone thought he was dead, and it's wrong, And not being where I could go to his funeral or his viewing or anything like that, like, that was also a really big part of me staying in denial, But for months, I mean, even my friend that lives up in New York that I was telling you about that was also close to him, she kept telling me, she was like, Sam, you can't keep doing, like, he's gone. Like, you've got to learn, you've got to at some point start moving on, because he would not want you to sit here like this. And I never expressed to her to the point, like, to what extent I was troubled with that. I just kept telling her, like, I don't feel like he's actually gone. Like, that's the thing, is that I don't feel like he has actually left. And I'll never, like, the day that we got the news, because one of his family members had posted something on Facebook, and I was working on the late shift at work on this movie because we had some night shoots, and I had to go in super late. And so I think it was one day where I came in at like 11 a.m. or 12, like around noon. And I had only been there for about like 10, 15 minutes. One of my, like, very close friends, she's actually been on the podcast before. Her name's Morgan. We were working in the office together, and I had gotten there and she was out on a run, and it was just me and the secretary there in the office. And I want to say, like, our assistant production coordinator, which was like my direct up boss, and our production coordinator, which was like the big boss of the office, they were there. And I noticed there was just this weird feeling in the air, because some of them had already known about it, but just for, like, confidential purposes and things like that, they just didn't share anything until it was public, But one of my friends called me that was in the same department as him, that had just left the show a little bit before. He called me, and I was busy, so I wasn't able to answer. And I was like, I'll call him back later. Well, just a few minutes later, he called me again. And that was very unlike him. Like, because he would call me a lot, but whenever he called me, if I wasn't able to answer, he would just text me. But he called me again, and I was like, that's so weird. Let me step out. And so I answered the phone, and I was like, hey, give me a second. I'm going to go step outside. And he was like, okay. So I went and stepped outside, and whenever I got on the phone, I was like, all right, what's up? He, I remember him saying, and I'm not going to say the friend's name just for, privacy for his family and privacy for everybody that cared for him. But he said, such and such is dead. And I said, no, he's not. Like, I literally, like, my first reaction was like, no, he's not. And he was like, he is. And then I laughed. That's something I'll never forget, is that I laughed because I was just so taken aback. I was like, you're lying. Like, stop playing jokes. Like, stop pretending. And he was like, I'm not lying. Like, he passed, and I was like, what happened? And he was like, I don't know, but someone just posted this on Facebook. And I was like, can you send me the screenshot? And when he sent me the screenshot, I realized it was someone that I was also friends with on Facebook that was part of his family. So I went and looked, and I was like, and it was the day before April Fool's Day too. And I know that's so twisted for me to think, but I was like, this is an April Fool's joke. Like, this is not, they're all joking. This is some type of twisted, like, screwed up joke that they're doing. It's not real, And so I went and read the post and looked through all the comments and everything. And it was just like, the more I read, the more I felt myself, like, sinking, And I remember my first reaction to it was, I was just so angry. Like, after I got over the initial shock, after my weird laugh, I just became angry. And I was just sitting at my desk, and like the secretary, she could tell, because the secretary is a little bit of a higher position than what I was. I was an office PA, and she could tell something was up with me because I'm usually a really like bouncy, happy, positive person at work. I try to just like do teamwork and get things done. And if I'm upset about something, I'll rant and then let it go and move on, you know? And so she's been used to that the entire time. It was toward the end of the show. So she was like, "What's up?" And I was just like, "Nothing." You know, like nothing, and I don't want to talk about it. And so then I stepped out and called my friend that lives up in New York that I was telling you about. And I told her, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "He passed." And she was like, "How?" And I was like, "I don't know." She started crying, of course, and I still hadn't cried. Like, and so she came back to that. She was like, "I'm almost at the office and we can talk about it there." And so then I asked my friend Morgan, I texted her because she was out on the run. And I was like, if I had bad news, would you rather me call you and tell you now, or wait for you to get back to the office and tell you in person? And she was like, "Go ahead and call me and tell me now." So I called and let her know, because she was also really good friends with him. She started crying. And that was something that was like, everyone just cried, you know? And then when I went back inside, I let the secretary know, because, you know, I was like, "I don't want to talk about it. But this is what happened. So just know that Morgan's probably going to be upset, and I'm probably going to step out a lot because my friend such and such that, you know, I told also is probably going to need me." The secretary was like, "Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know." And I went through so much of the day. Like, I want to say it like took a couple of hours, but then the secretary and my friend Morgan both stepped out. My friend that was the publicist that was there, we talked for a little bit and kind of went over everything. And she went and asked my boss, the assistant production coordinator. I didn't want to ask because I was very upset, and I knew that I was going to come across as very angry. But she went and asked the production coordinator if she knew, and the production coordinator was like, "Yeah, but I can't talk about it." And so I just sat, you know, and I worked, and I didn't really know what to do. And I was just in a weird mood. And it wasn't until finally the production secretary and Morgan, they both had to go somewhere and go on a run, and I was by myself, that it just hit me. And it hit me all at once. And I remember I cried so hard in that room by myself. And of course I didn't like wail or anything like that. It was just like sniffling and like quiet crying. And like, I just could not handle it. I couldn't hold myself together. And later, my boss, I had to go show her something outside, and she like stopped and she was like, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you, like, I heard you crying and I wanted so badly to come in there, but it's been really hard for me to hold it together today too. And I didn't know what to do." And, you know, she cried and we hugged each other and everything, but it was just very difficult all around. But I think that was because it was so unexpected. Like with my dad, I did a lot of pre-grieving, you know, like I knew that my dad was not going to last much longer. I knew that my senior year is when he came back into my life and wanted a relationship with me. And I really didn't want one, but I knew that future me would appreciate me putting in the time with my dad, you know, because future me would look back and have no question if I should have let him back in or not, because past me did, you know? And so I did it, enjoyed, you know, having him back in my life. We had a very like special and unique relationship. And when he passed, I mean, it was hard, but I grieved the way you grieve, you know, like I never went through denial, but I was just like, and I accepted it, you know, because I had already done so much grieving. And, you know, I revisit that process every once in a while because it is your dad, and grief is like a process that you go through forever. It's never just like a simple 5-step thing. It's something you carry all the time. But with my dad, I hate to say it like this, but grieving was easy. But with my friend that I lost earlier this year, especially because he was a couple of years younger than me, like, that it's been very, very difficult. And I still like have dreams about him. And whenever I wake up, I'm sad all over again, you know? Most days I think about him at least a few times, you know? How did you react when you first got that news about either your sister or your cousin or your grandma? Like, what were some of the first things that went through your head?
Well, just to bounce off what you were speaking of with your dad, with my mom, she was hospice, so it was something that I was able to prepare myself for as much as you can.
Yeah.
I specifically remember I was starting to prepare for my finals. So the show must go on, you know how it is in school. And so I was able to pre-prepare a little bit. You know, it was still gut-wrenching, but I had that little time. But with my sister, you know, hers being very not expected. I was at work. I just finished a day at school. It was raining really hard that day. I specifically remember the news on the night before, 2 nights before, where it was so dry. There was no rain. It was so dry in Chilton County at the time, to where they put all over the news, the screener at the bottom talking about be careful driving, because it's going to be, all the buildup on the road, because it just rained that day, that night prior to. And we're just, given that warning. And then on that way to school that day, it was raining so hard that I pulled over and I called Mom and I said I was scared. She said, well, just stay there till it lets up, and if you don't feel that safe, then we can come get you, or you can stay there till it passes, or come back home, whatever I needed to do, So I just sat there for about 5 minutes, and I went to school, but I remember telling her that I didn't feel right. I didn't feel good. So I went to class, and then right after class, I went to my job, the farmer's market, And I remember I was setting up the nativity scene and putting up Christmas lights. I was very happy, cold outside, holidays, that's my time that I love so much with my family. And I was dating Trey at the time, my now husband, and it was just great. And I remember my parents pulled up with my brother, my oldest brother, which it was his birthday. And as soon as I saw them get out, at the same time, I saw our then pastor and his wife in another vehicle. But I saw the pastor and his wife first. And I kind of had a feeling. I walked up to the front, and the first thing I say is happy birthday to my brother. And then my dad takes my hands, and as soon as he took my hands, it's a blur, but he said he needed to tell me something, along those lines, of course. And in my stomach, like deep down, I knew that it was my sister. And they told me that, Heather was gone. And they said it in such a way, it's a blur, of course, that whole moment. It was one of those things you just never think is going to happen to you. You expect one day to lose your grandparents. You even, God forbid, even you expect your parents at some point.
Yeah.
Not when they're younger, but you expect them to go peacefully in their older age, But it was my sister, and, even me wanting to tell you exactly how it was, grief is so messy.
Yeah.
There's your steps, but it doesn't mean they're going to be in order. And even talking about it and putting it all together, it'd be so difficult, And then that my process just begun, and we drove home, and those two officers at the end of our steps, as well as my sister's fiance, which, she went to go turn in application because she was about to graduate, and she even had her bag ready on the table because they were about to go on a trip where he was going to propose to her that night. So I walk in, I pass the officer's him. I don't say anything. I'm in shambles. I walk in, and my brother is my youngest brother, older than me, but the youngest of the boys.
Yeah.
He hugged me tight, and we didn't say words. It was just like a sob in unison.
Yeah.
I'll never, forget. I'll forget certain moments because it was a blur, but overall, I won't forget that day. And my cousin, I received a phone call. She had Lyme disease, dead adrenals. She had a lot of issues, but it was still unexpected. I got the phone call from her sister, her baby sister, just kind of screaming her name. That was still tough how I found out. But as someone who has also lost her sister, I'll hold nothing against that.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak too much on her journey and how she was there for her sister in literally her last moments as a nurse. So, I can't speak too much on how that made me feel, how I was told, of course, but, I went in there and screaming to my parents, we have to go. And the whole way there, we were just praying and crying, my parents staying strong because, they knew this was going to be another hit, of course. And I think it's important about that. You spoke on how you told people with your friend and his passing, and it's kind of it's a responsibility in a way, because you are now in charge of that person's moment.
Yeah.
You're now in charge of how they were going to remember that moment when they found out. I know that with my sister, I was just about to go on my break, my 30-minute break. And I didn't, because I said I wanted to finish my decorations. And I'm so thankful I did keep decorating, because people were already tagging me in the post of her accident on Facebook.
Oh my gosh.
They were already, and not only that, some of them thought it was me because it didn't say her name. It just said a young Favina woman. So some people thought it was me. I also had people calling me, and my phone was in my locker, thank God, because there was people texting me, "Are you okay?" I had people that I haven't talked to, honestly, in years, or especially since graduation, calling me to see if it was me, crying. I had voicemails that they thought it was me that died.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yes, it was something else, and I'm just so thankful that I wanted to keep decorating, because if I would have found out through being tagged on Facebook and not my parents, I just don't know.
Yeah.
And then for people to just start tagging me in it immediately, first of all, if you thought it was me and you're tagging me in it, I mean,
what good is that going to do? Yeah, exactly.
Okay. There's that. And then there's people tagging it that did know it was Heather, and it's like, can you, I don't know, give me a second? How do you know I even know?
Yeah.
But, a lot of time, people on Facebook or whatever, they think that that's the best thing, or, I'm not going to shed any tears over that. It was in poor taste, but then again, you don't always know people's heart and their intent, so but that just would have been such a way to find out, and I'm thankful it was my parents. But I will say this, my parents have told me now since then they wish they would have took me to the office at my job and told me, but it was so raw and it was so fresh. And my parents, their experience and how they found out in itself, and they also said they wish they didn't have the pastor and his wife there, because they didn't, not only did they not know Heather, but they just thought in that moment it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But they said the times past they wish they didn't. Not that I even spoke to them, but it was just kind of a thing they thought. But for my parents, my mom was at the door, and the officer walked up with her wallet, her floral wallet, and my mom immediately felt anger. Immediate anger. She opened that door, said, "What are you doing with her wallet?" Like, she would, along those lines, like, it was immediate anger, because she immediately knew, because Dad was an officer.
Yeah.
She knew the protocol, if you will. So that moment when you find out is, you don't forget it, and then the person that had the responsibility of telling you doesn't forget it either.
Yeah. That's, I've never even thought about it before, like a responsibility, because thinking about how, one, I was told about my dad, but then also, two, how I was told about my friend. Like, my aunt is the one who called me about my dad, because I had just been, it was the first night of my Christmas break. It was December 12th of 2015. That the night before, I had just been hanging out with my aunt and one of my cousins. And I hadn't seen my aunt or my cousin in a while, and we were at this bar. And it was, I want to say it was somewhere in Florida, like in Pensacola, because, Pensacola is not too far from Mobile. And so either that or it was like somewhere close to there. I do know that much, but it was kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. And it was a lot of fun. There was a singer that was there that my aunt was a really big fan of, and it was a cool time. And so then I drove back, and I was staying with my sister for a little bit over that break before going up to visit my mom, because my sister lived probably about like 15 minutes outside of Mobile. And so I was asleep on my sister's couch. I get a phone call at 6 a.m. that morning, and I see that it's my aunt, and I answer the phone, sleepily. And she said, "Hey, kiddo, I know that we were just out last night having a good time, and I know that, we were just having a lot of fun and everything, but I have some news, and I just need to let you know that your dad passed." And, honestly, like my aunt and I, we still aren't very close. Like we've never really been close. She has been like, she's always my closest aunt, or like she's my dad's sibling that I'm the closest to. I'll put it that way. But we've never really been like in each other's lives a whole lot. And so, to be honest, that was kind of like the perfect way to tell me in such a weird situation over the phone like that, especially because I was in a position where no one else could have let me know. Like my sister was at work. I mean, she could have called me, but she was processing all on her own, And so for my aunt just to call me and be like, hey, this is, like, I know that this is going to be shocking. I know that we were just having such a good time, and like, this is going to be random and out of nowhere, and it is not going to be fun. So I'm just going to tell you, that was honestly the best way. But that was the best way for me because I'm a very like straightforward, blunt person. I like to have the same like energy thrown at me, because to me, like being straightforward and blunt doesn't mean you have to be rude. You can be kind with it. And that's exactly what she did. She was very straightforward. Right. She cushioned me a little bit and then just gave me the blow, and that's how, whenever I didn't realize it until now that we're talking about it, but looking back at it, I modeled me giving that information to other people very similarly, with my friend that was the publicist that was also close to our friend and everything. And I hate that I have to keep describing who she is, but I haven't gotten her permission to say her name, so I'm not going to yet. But
of course,
but so she, whenever I called her, I remember telling her like, hey, she was like, hey, how are you? And I was like, I'm not doing too well. And she was like, what's going on? And I was like, well, I have some bad news. And I was like, do you want me to tell you now, or do you want to wait until you get here and me tell you in person? And she was like, go ahead and tell me what's up. And so I told her, and she immediately, like I said, started crying. And then with my friend Morgan too, it was a very similar setup where it was like, how would you prefer me tell you? Like, this is not going to be fun. Yeah. This is not going to be great. How would you prefer, getting this news? So I didn't realize it, but I really did model how I told my friends after how my aunt told me. But the thing that I definitely think is interesting is that if you look at it like a responsibility thing, then those people tagging you on Facebook, it's like, that wasn't their responsibility. They shouldn't have done that. Like, to me, and to think of something like that, like, that's really such a harmless thing, but such a harmful thing too. Like, to them,
absolutely, they
probably didn't even think about the fact that, like, Olivia may not know, like, there's a lot of people and a lot of immediate family that this information needs to get to, and then also for the people that thought it was you, it's like, what good is it going to do tagging you? And also, what good is it going to do calling you and blowing up your phone? I mean, I know that, like, if you call them, if you think it's them and you call them, like, I guess not getting the answer would, like, kind of confirm, but then that's just going to have people freaking out when you can't answer, like, so that just, I don't know, to me, it seems like I've never really been the person to, like, jump up and, like, make it my business when someone passes, Even with his family, I waited until like way later that day that I had seen them post on Facebook and stuff like that. And literally all I texted was, it was his aunt that I knew because I had also worked on movies with her. And I just texted her and said, hey, I just wanted to tell you that I'm so sorry for your loss. Please let me know if you need anything. And I, just left it at that. And I didn't get a response, and I didn't need one because I was messaging someone in his family, like, I loved him and he was a very dear friend of mine, but like, family trumps friend most of the time, like, so in that situation, I just wanted to be very respectful to her and to his family. And so I, made sure, one, that I wasn't, obviously she wouldn't have been the one to not know, but I wouldn't have done it if there was any thought in my mind that she didn't know yet. I would have given it a couple of days. And so then I put together a little memorial thing for him. It wasn't really anything like huge. It was just like a few of us showed up at where we all very first met him, where we had worked on another movie at the end of the year before. And we just lit candles for him, shared happy memories. And then he had this hat that he used to wear all the time that instead of having like the back strap, it was a ribbon, like a pink ribbon that was tied in a bow. And that was his like signature thing. So we all got pink ribbon and tied it in bows around a balloon and released the balloon. And so that was like, very nice. But I made sure I asked, their permission. I unfortunately didn't know his mom or his sister at the time. I know them now. We've connected now after his passing. But at the time I didn't know them, so I didn't ask for their permission, but I did ask for his aunt's permission and just said, like, I don't want to step on any toes. I don't want to, take away from, your experience as grieving him. And she was like, no, thank you so much for loving him. Like, please, by all means, do whatever you want to do for him, So
Yeah.
I think that, like, maybe people that have experienced that type of grief, maybe they treat people that are experiencing that with more respect. And then if you've never experienced that type of grief, then you make it your business to be all up in it,
Absolutely, because, if you haven't been on the inside of it, some people could hear this and be like, was it really necessary to get confirmation for this or that? No, it is.
Yeah.
Because grief brings out such a vicious, for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen a lot of people, can bring out such a vicious, possessive, indescribable feeling.
Yeah.
That just can't put your finger on.
This is something that we've talked about before, and so I'm comfortable saying it now, that, my dad had passed just like a year and a month before your sister had passed. And I didn't really I grieved a little bit right after he passed, but I really didn't start like grieving until about 6 months after his death. And so when she passed, I was hardly on social media. I didn't see anything. I didn't know anything. And I want to say it was in like December before I actually found out that she had passed, because you and I have always had that kind of friendship where like we don't talk sometimes for months, and then we'll get on the phone and talk for like hours, catch up and FaceTime, or like I'll be in town and we'll go grab dinner and drive around and like catch up, and then we go our separate ways and may not talk again for a few months, And so, and it's always been a very like happy friendship like that. Like once I left Clanton and once you had gotten into college, we understood that we had our own lives and that we loved each other and we'd always make time for each other, but we didn't have to talk every day, I didn't think anything of it like, not hearing from you for that point in time, especially because with my dad, how I grieved was I really like isolated myself. And I will say, like I said, I did have a really good, I grieved him very healthily in my opinion, but there were some things that I did that I'm like, that was unhealthy. And that probably would have been a warning sign to anybody close to me, And one of those was isolating myself. And so when you told me your sister passed, I didn't know what to do. I remember I told you how sorry I was and told you that if you ever needed to talk to let me know. But after that, I did not know, that's one thing. And I've said this before, that one of my biggest regrets was not being there for you more and not making myself available to you more, because I just didn't because of how my dad passed and I was still grieving him and everything. I was I've isolated myself and I wanted to be left alone. Does she want to be left alone? But then also I was like, can I even compare losing a parent to a sister? Because my dad and I, I was the closest to him out of any of his kids, because all my siblings that were his kids had been done with him because he wasn't a great dad, just to put it plain and simple. And so I had given him the time. I'd done the pre-grieving. I had a relationship with him and everything, but we were not that close. Not like you and Heather. I was also can I even compare the two? Grief is grief, loss is loss, but that's a sibling. That is someone that you imagine yourself being with and having there with you for the rest of your life, especially when you're close like that, And so for my dad though, I've always known that I would end up having to, I'd end up losing my parents, So that just I got stuck in this weird loop of she probably wants to be left alone. I also don't know what I can do for her because the grief I have is with my dad and it's incomparable to what she's going through.
If I may, Sam, I will tell you that from my remembrance of that time, and time can be so blurry. It's 1 minute, it's like it just happened. The next minute feels like I haven't seen her in years and years.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that you were there for me. And don't feel any guilt, because it was just, there was nothing anyone could do for me.
Yeah.
It was my own journey, and I isolated as well. And I was at the point people were texting me. I wasn't even replying. It's not because I don't know what to say. I have nothing to give.
Yeah.
My sponge was full of water at one point, and it was totally wringed out to where it was just so bone dry. I had nothing to give.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to ever feel that because it is so tricky about there for someone that is grieving. You want to do so much and say the most comforting words, but sometimes, words fail you, or, it's just such a personal thing that you just have to just be so deep in that pain and actually feel it.
Yeah.
Because the more you shove it, we all, I definitely shoved it down, and as have you, and as did you, to where you're like, I got this, I'm fine, I got this, and then it just flows out of you. One little thing happened, triggers you.
Yeah.
And it's like, you wouldn't even think it would. The oddest of things that, not the things you would immediately think, like seeing a picture, sometimes that didn't for me. It was seeing one of her old T-shirts with a hole in it that I saw her wear outside one day.
Yeah.
The strangest things get you. So I just want you to know, I don't want you to feel that.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for saying that. And I know we've talked about it before, and you said something very similar before too. And I think it was just at that point in time I was dealing with my own grief, but also wanted to be there for yours, And so it just caused a lot of overthinking and overlooking into stuff. And also during that point in time in my life, there was a lot of other stuff going on. And looking back, I was very self-centered in general during that time. And I realized that that was the point in my life where I had finally started shifting from that immature, everything is about me outlook to, oh, there are other people having their own experiences, doing their own thing. And so I was dead center of that, I was dead in the middle of I want to do what I want to do, which is be there for her. But then also I'm like, how do I be there for her? Also, does she even want me to be there for her? Because I know that I didn't really want people to talk to me about my dad, So it was just, there was a lot of feelings and stuff going on. And so
many feelings. It's like you want to take care of someone else, but it's like, hey, I need to take care of me.
Yeah.
I have no business to take care of somebody else when my mask isn't even on.
And then sometimes you're not the one who can, I know with your family, that was something that there were moments where you told me that you would be dealing with something and you'd be like, I feel better. I went and talked to my mom about it. Me and my mom just had a good conversation about it. And, there's certain things that when you're grieving with your family like that friends just can't give it to you, you really have to go bond with your parent for a little bit or bond with your other sibling. And there's something, because it's something only you guys are experiencing in that moment. And you're unsure if anyone around you has ever actually experienced it.
Or those, just those childhood memories, or us living in the same home, or, simply sharing that blood. And just, I was able to see her. She was in undergrad and she was a week away from graduating. I mean, she already had her cap and gown ironed, and ready to go, and living in the same house with her, and just seeing her go through that. Because, she moved away at one point and then came back home, and just seeing her go through it, and just that day-to-day life, coffee in the morning, banter with our mom and dad, or jokes, or, just life.
Yeah.
Just life.
Something too that, you talked about was pushing down emotions and stuff like that. And with my friend, I think that's been one of the weirdest things is that this has been really difficult because there were a lot of other things that I won't get into because it's really not business that should be put out in the open. But basically there were just some things left unanswered. To give you a little summary of the last moments that were spent with him, or for me at least, we were working on the same movie and I signed an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. So there are certain things that happened on that movie that was just really not okay that I'm not allowed to talk about publicly because I signed an NDA, But there were certain things where certain higher up people were really mistreating him, and it was not okay. With COVID, the unions have their own COVID guidelines, and studios also have their own COVID guidelines. And so as the position he was in was that his job was to make sure that every single thing that happened on the movie met the union's guidelines and the studio's guidelines. And usually, almost all the time, the studio's guidelines are going to match up with the union's guidelines. And so there were some weird discrepancies where basically the show was supposed to be a fully vaccinated show and then ended up not being a fully vaccinated show, which happens oh so often. And he was trying to change then his guidelines from being, oh, this is going to be fully vaccinated to, okay, it's not fully vaccinated. And so basically which is fine. Like, you can have a not vaccinated show and still meet like COVID guidelines by unions, but you have to be more diligent. And so he was trying to cover all the bases and everything just in case the film were to get audited. And it's hard to do, though, when your own bosses that are in charge of the entire film are coming against you and basically saying, hey, too bad, I know you're trying to follow the rules, but we're not going to do that. And then when the studio also changes their guidelines halfway through, it just causes a lot of confusion. And studios are allowed to change their guidelines, so I'm not saying that saying that's wrong whatsoever. It's just that there's a lot that goes into reading a studio's new guidelines versus union's guidelines and seeing where they meet in the middle so that you can still follow those rules. Yeah. And so he was just being very, 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 very mistreated. And there came to a point where one union made it known that they were in question of some of the guidelines that were put on the film and if they had been followed. I can't say whether they were or not because NDA, and also I'm not in that department, but basically that put my friend in a really weird position, and he saw no other option but to leave, because if he would have stayed, he felt as if he would have been blamed for a mistake that could have been made, even though he had done everything that he could to make sure guidelines had been followed and people above him were the ones pushing against him. And so I remember when he told me, I was walking my friend that is the unit publicist back to her hotel, which was also the hotel he was in, because it was right next to where set was. I had to do a run to set, so I had parked at the hotel. And so we're walking back, and he comes walking around the building. And he's on the phone, and then he sees us, walks up to us, puts his phone down, and he starts talking to us. And he's like, well, have you guys heard? And I was like, heard what? And he said, basically, we are walking, which means that the whole department in unison with him said, he's leaving because of X, Y, and Z, and he has been mistreated. So therefore we are also leaving, And so he said, we're all walking. And he kind of got into detail, which I won't repeat. And I remember you said that you knew something was up. That was something so sinister to me, because the moment that he said that, and he said he was driving back home, I felt this gut wrenching feeling like I was never going to see him again. And I
was that the last time you did see him in the
that was the last time I saw him. And it was the last time I spoke to him. I remember whenever he said that, I just hugged him. I just reached out and gave him the biggest hug I could. And he gave me a really big hug back. And then he pulled away and he was talking, and then he got a phone call and he ignored it and kept talking. But then his phone just kept ringing and kept ringing and kept ringing. Finally, he was like, I have to take this. This is, and then he said the name. I'm not going to say the person's name, but basically it was higher up at the studio. And he answered the phone and he stood there for a minute, and he was going to try and wrap up the conversation, but they just kept talking to him. And so finally he said, hold on one second, to them, and pulled the phone away and was like, I'm going to go talk to this person. And so before he walked off, I said, wait. And I just gave him another really big hug, because I just felt this overwhelming pit. And something told me you're never going to see him again. And so I just gave him such a tight hug. And see, the thing is that he was such an intuitive person. He was there was just something about him. And when I hugged him like that, he pulled away and he looked at me. There's just this understanding. I'm telling you, I don't know how to explain it. There's something otherworldly about it. But he looked at me and looked at me in my eyes, really questioningly. And then he had this realization on his face, and he was like, thank you. And then gave me another hug and walked off. And I was a wreck for a week, because I knew something was gonna happen. A week to the day later is when he passed. There was a whole lot that was wrapped up with it, where I had a lot of unanswered questions. I didn't know what, I didn't know what to think, what to feel, what to do. And I think me being angry was a mix of me pushing the feelings down, and then also taking that responsibility to share the information with other people, because all my friends were sad. All my friends felt heartbroken, so I couldn't be heartbroken because I had to be there for them, and realistically we could have all been heartbroken together. And I actually really tried, because there was a lot that happened leading up to his death with a lot of his friends that we had all met around the same time. Last year when we were working on a movie together, And there was a lot that happened in that group where we all just kind of split up and we're no longer friends. And to put it plain and simple, and I'm not going to go into detail just because this isn't the time, but it was over political differences and what certain people are allowed to say. I guess like in that moment, I was looking for closeness too. But because I didn't have anything, I wanted us all that knew him and met him around the same time to try and mend things and like come back together as a group. And like, because he wouldn't have wanted us all to be broken up and like not friends anymore. And so I tried, and everyone seemed really on board with it, but nobody was willing to like walk the walk. And certain people came back around and were like, yeah, like, let's chill. Sorry that everything went the way it was, blah, blah, blah. And then months later went right back to being exactly how they were before, you know? So it like brought on this like temporary change and like closeness with people, but that nobody wanted to actually uphold once the reality of him being gone had actually set in. And I think that was just, that honestly was the most heartbreaking part for me, was that no one felt the same way that I did, if that makes sense. Like nobody wanted to try and keep him alive through our friendships, you know? And after that, I just got sad and I just got depressed. And I think denial was what was weird, is that for anybody that doesn't know, the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And there's like, they are in that order, but the thing is that they don't stay in that order. So my 2 that were with denial, that happened at the same time of denial, was anger and depression. I went from anger to depression, but kept denial with me the whole time. And I started using my depression as a tool to deny, because if I stayed depressed about it, then I stayed motivated to constantly remind myself that like, or try to convince myself that he wasn't actually dead.
Yeah.
And I would be willing to then continue denying because I was so sad that he was gone. And I remember my friend, publicist, that was telling me, well, I remember one day she was like, you're going to have to move on. He would not want you to sit here and be sad like this anymore. You are going to feel okay again. You're going to wake up and be able to breathe again. You're going to, you're going to feel the ways you felt before he passed. You will eventually feel that way again. Because he would not want you sitting here like this. And bargaining was never really something that I went through, because how do you even bargain in that situation, And so I finally, honestly, just a few months ago, finally started reaching acceptance. And I mean, it has not even been a full year, like it's been way less than a year. So I probably will face all of this again, but it is like a process that just repeats itself over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Absolutely. And I'm not too convinced that me personally, and a lot of people, or maybe even you, not to put it on you, won't be going through the cycle the rest of your life.
Oh yeah. And, you absolutely do.
Even if it's, that depression, it's a silent depression, that internalized depression that the only person that knows about it is you.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right.
Person on this anyway that knows about it and how personal it is, and it's a everyday thing. It really is.
I know that one thing that just, because for me, like, I absolutely agree. Grieving is something that lasts for so long, and like it does. I mean, you don't just like, you may get a break for a few months or a year, but then it comes back, It's not something that just like, once you're done, you're done. Like, grieving is a whole process, because you're going to constantly enter new phases of your life where you're reminded that person's not there, or it's not with this person. One of the hardest things too is that people moved on, and like my friend was trying to tell me like, hey, you need to start trying to move on. And she was doing it in a very loving way. But I was just so angry that some of his friends just moved on so quickly. It was like 2 months had passed, and they were back to living their lives and having a good time and doing whatever, and just didn't seem sad anymore. And it's not fair for me to judge, because everyone grieves in their own way. And they very well could have been like sobbing at home, but then still choosing to go live their lives, But to me, it just seemed like everyone was just okay. And I mean, besides his family, are still grieving, still post about him a lot. Like, it's, and I hate to say this, and I hope it doesn't come out wrong, come out in a rude way or anything like that, but it's refreshing to see that they're still grieving, because so many people just stopped.
It's a matter of, keeping their memory alive. And when somebody means something to you and you know how deeply you hurt, it's almost a feeling of honor to know that someone else felt just as deeply or had that respect or same love for this person. Because when these people in our lives, they die, the world still goes on. The show must still go on.
Yeah.
And you still go to work, you still go to school, people still have their lives.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see someone feeling pain too, it's almost a feeling of, not that they would want you to feel it and keep feeling it, but that feeling of respect for that other person in your relationship, and that person meant something to you. And it's very weird hearing it if you haven't experienced it, to think that, what, you found someone else's pain refreshing? It's not as simple as it sounds. It's complex, it's hairy, it's confusing, it's
messy.
It's grief. It's messy. It's so messy.
Another thing too that really just bothered me, and I once again should not judge people, but there were some people that when they posted on social media about it, they talked about it as if like it was like a pet that had passed. Like they just were like, wow, this one's going to hurt for a while. Gonna miss you, buddy. Like, what is that? What do you even mean by that? You know? And I mean, you know, like I don't expect people to get on Facebook like and pour their hearts out, you know, or like, and put all their feelings out there on social media. But it's like when you're posting all the time, you're posting about how you're living your life up and posting about your accomplishments and everything you're getting to do. And you're doing it while, you know, everyone knows that your friend just passed or your loved one just passed. And then you put a post up like, gonna miss you, buddy. Like, what does that even mean? What do you're just gonna miss you, you know, like that just bugs me so much.
Well, I can maybe to shine a little light on that side, not like treating it as if it's a pet, because that's just not right.
Yeah.
But I know after my sister's passing, and even with my cousin, a lot of people, friends or some family, were making consistent posts, everyday posts.
Yeah.
And I wasn't.
Yeah.
Because Facebook didn't mean nothing to my grief, in the sense that I didn't have, and you know, it's not the case for everybody, but to prove that I'm in pain or whatever, I could care less how much people thought I was in pain or not.
Yeah.
And people made comments about it, you best believe.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people make comments about not feeling like I was in pain, or that it would be easy for me to get through it because I wasn't plastering things everywhere, because I was in a hole, you know?
Yeah.
But I know what you mean in the sense where people make comments so kind of nonchalantly, like, well,
exactly,
it'll be another day.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, darn. You know, like, I just like, what? Like, and like I said, everyone grieves differently. So please know that I'm not like gonna judge anyone for how they grieve or how they react to grief. Just from my personal experience, like only seeing from my point of view, those were things that I felt, you know, those were things that I saw, and I reacted to it how I will react to it, you know, like through the grieving process. That's the thing with grief, is that grief becomes such a normal part of your everyday life. And you almost have to make room for grief or make allowances for grief. And something that I don't know if you knew this or not, but my senior seminar was about the 5 stages of grief. And whenever I was in college, and I submitted it to a like symposium competition that my school was having, and I won second place. And it was the research was all about how I used color theory in a short film to relate to each of the stages of grief. And I showed examples of where in the short film I inserted certain colors that were just, you know, meant to blend in with the background, but they like each character that represented a certain stage, like had a specific color that they wore. And so whenever I presented that, I learned about a lot about the stages of grief, because then I had to do more research to explain even further, like how I did it, you know? And so now that I'm an adult, I have realized that, or like now that I'm like out of college and like a fully functioning adult in society, grief is something that happens a lot. Like, it's not just for death. Like, if you break up, you grieve. If you lose a friend, you grieve. If you lose a job, you grieve. You move away to a different city, you grieve. But what's so weird about that grief, because that grief seems so manageable, you know, that grief and then the grief of someone that you've lost, it's like when you're grieving your everyday normal things like that, it's easier to identify what you're doing. And then it's also, you're grieving by choice. Like you chose to leave. Someone chose to end a relationship. Someone chose to end a friendship. Some, like those are all choices. But when someone passes, no one chose that, and you're not grieving willingly. And I think that's what makes it so much harder.
Me personally, speak on my experience, will always be a part of me. Losing these women in my life, especially at such a ripe age. I mean, I'm just now 24. We can talk about it all day, and anything that we've said, I know neither of our intentions are ever to offend or raise a brow, because it's such a personal experience. And when you do grieve, like, you see things more clearly.
Yeah.
You see people's angles, agendas, if you will, more clearly. You see priority. You see how reckless and foolish people can be with the things they say or how they act or what's truly important, how fragile life is, how important relationships are, how you're going to remember the little casual moments more than you will the big moments. Yeah. You're going to remember those car drives, those little talks, those little inside jokes, the songs that person liked, what made them special, the chipped tooth they had, the smell of their hair, the shoes they liked to wear when it rained outside. I mean, just the things you wouldn't think you'd think about so much.
Yeah.
And, you just can't describe grief. It's just such a, it makes me speechless. As much as I've said, it makes you speechless. You know?
You've also, I mean, like I said, you grieved beautifully, and you are still, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. You're always, whenever people ask me like, who's your role model? Who's your hero? And that's my answer is always two people. And it's Steve Irwin and then Olivia Ellis, now Olivia Mixon. Like, that's just you just, anything that has ever been thrown at you in life, I've always seen you just handle it so beautifully. And even if it was hard, even if it was heartbreaking, even if it was devastating, you still just like somehow made the process beautiful and artistic. And just, I don't know, it's just something that I strive for in my life, to make processes that way. So I think that, you being able to talk about it so much now is just an evidence of how hard you've worked on this and how beautifully you've made this process. And now you're at a point where you can share it with other people and hopefully like help other people that are grieving also like see something similar in this. And hopefully they can identify with this and feel valid and feel like, okay, me feeling this way is normal,
Well, I first off want to say thank you so much for those kind words, because to say it's been a journey, of course, is an understatement. But I've had, my fair share of those dark moments that some people have seen, and then some people will never see or know about. From my personal experience, I have leaned on God because I will never have the answers I want.
Yeah.
I don't think we're meant to absolutely have all the answers and be all-knowing. I don't think that. And having my family that has been everything, and having my now husband that was there for me. We hadn't even been dating 4 months, and I can credit a lot to having strong people in my life. But then so being able to, look myself in the mirror and say, I have people that still love me and depend on me. And if something happened to me by my own hand, I couldn't do it. So, I appreciate you acknowledging the strength. And I feel the same way about you, Sam, and the strength and the struggles you've had, and you not always having that close-knit support system that I've been fortunate enough to have. I know my journey would look a lot different.
I appreciate that.
So just know that I see you too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You have always been such a good friend a good friend to me, and I think that you and I were definitely put in each other's lives for a reason.
People don't have to understand it. Mm-hmm. They don't have to completely understand it, our dynamic and what we have. but that's okay because it's what we have. We're not conventional friends in the sense that we do talk all the time. I know if we go without talking, we can pick right up like we were just talking yesterday.
Exactly. All right, well, I guess this will be a good place to close. I just want to say that anybody that's listening, that if you are dealing with grief and you're dealing with, well, I mean, really anything that is weighing on your mental health, do not feel like you are not allowed to feel the way you feel. You are valid, even if you react a way that I was talking bad about someone reacting earlier. That feeling is valid and that reaction is valid. And anything that you feel during this process is valid. Do not be afraid to reach out and get help. Do not be afraid to reach out to your friends. Like Olivia said, moments like these and situations like these show you the truth behind relationships and people's true intentions in your life. And the people that really matter to you, they will be there with you through it. And the people that you really matter to them will be there with you through it. And it will make your relationship even stronger with them. So, never be afraid to reach out and get help. Never be afraid to accept what you're feeling and believe it is valid.
Amen.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning back into Enhance. I am Samm Brown, your host as usual. And today I was joined by Olivia Mixon, one of my very, very best friends and longest friends. And if you want to find me on social media, I'm at Sammed If You Do. That's SAMMED If You Do. I'm that on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. If you want to find the podcast, you can find it at Enhance on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and you can find it on YouTube at Enhance Podcast. And please, by all means, always feel free to reach out to me. You can slide my DMs. Tell me what you think about certain episodes. Tell me topics you would like to have covered. And let me know if you're dealing with any grief and just want someone to talk to. I mean, as you've heard, I got plenty to say about it. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. New episodes every Saturday and bonus episodes the third Wednesday of every month. Bye.
Enhance your peace,
Your joy,
and your existence.